All right, we are live. Thank everybody for your patience and for being here today with us. In case you are wondering who I am, my name is Antonio Bryce. I am the creator of the comic book series brand. We have raised over $69,000 on Indiegogo, thanks to kind folks such as yourself. But I have a very special guest with me today, from film and television and just, oh man, it's gonna be so cool. He's got a great project called Sithrah that is on Indiegogo right now. These are books 5 and 6, but you can actually get all 6 books on his Indiegogo right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Brubaker.
Thanks for having me, Antonio. This is really exciting.
Man, glad to have you. Whew.
Yeah.
This is a journey, but man, it looks like your book's doing pretty well. It looks like, let me see, I'm looking on your Indiegogo. You're just shy of $62,000 right now, which is not too shabby.
If you add the Kickstarter, I had a week-long Kickstarter and it raised $10,000, $10,300. So we're over 72, like total now, which is, my little secret goal is 80,000. I've been wishing for 80,000 because what that would do is pay for the production of the next books that I start working on. So it's, to me, it's already pretty much there, and I'm like, anything more is icing on the cake. And
okay, so let me actually ask you about Sithrah, because as I was doing some research, it looks like these are like all collected. You were releasing them as like a web series or something.
Yeah, well, first, so to step back a little bit, I started putting webcomics out there with my first series called Remind, and it was in 2009. I'd been working on it for about 3 years, I'm thinking, I'll just try to get a publisher, whatever. But then I got a job at DreamWorks, and so I was kind of like, what do I do with this personal project? So I just started putting it online, trying to experiment with how to grow an audience and seeing if anyone beyond my family cared. And sure enough, like, people started following it. And at the peak, I was getting like 2,000 unique viewers every Monday when I would post a new page. And so at the time, that was a big deal because there wasn't a lot of long format web comics online at the time. And so the following started growing, and then launched Kickstarters and just realized this whole business model of like giving it away for free first online, and allowing the audience to just fall in love with the content, and then being able to sell them a collector's type book later. It just turned into such a neat business model. And so I approached my first graphic novel series that way, Remind 1 and 2, and they both did extremely well on Kickstarter. Remind 2 raised $107,000. So that was kind of eye-opening at the time. It broke records at the time, basically. Wow. And then a year later, I started working on Sithrah. I was still at DreamWorks. I wasn't quite sure what the business model would be because things started changing. But I knew I just wanted to make this big, long series. It was going to be 6 or 7 books long. It ended up being 6. And I just started putting it online, just like I did with Remind. And then when I left DreamWorks, I was approached by this company called Webtoons, which is a South Korean company where they just try to get content a lot of comics by different artists on their site. It's kind of like the YouTube, but of comic books. Yes. Kinda. There's problems with it, but anyway, so they wanted to pay me to be a featured artist on Webtoons, which meant I would have a slot. Like every week, I would have a slot, and they would promote it on their homepage and stuff like that. And they would pay me a flat rate to just deliver the content every week. And I had to have exclusivity onto their platform for like 3 years. So I was like, okay, well, this would pay my bills if I move out of LA and move back to Idaho, where I was kind of planning on moving. So it kind of worked out perfect. I started putting it on Webtoons, moved out here. I did that for about 2.5 years. And this was after the first book had already raised funds on Kickstarter. Like, I had already published the first book, and then they approached me. And so in the contract, I made sure that I had the rights to be able to print it whenever I wanted. I could still do Kickstarters. I could still have my Patreon account. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And so, 2.5 years later, I finished all the books, but I was cranking them out because I was putting them out on this website weekly, like 10 to 20 pages a day, a week, full color. And so it ended up I ended up getting all the books done, but it was just like, I didn't want to have a Kickstarter every 3 months or 6 months, you know? So I just kind of waited and had a Kickstarter every year. And now I finally, you know, was about ready to launch this one. I was like, instead of just doing one book, I have them both done. I might as well just do a Kickstarter for the last 2 books, you know, Indiegogo, I'm sorry. And people can get the last book like a year before it comes out in stores. So that's where I'm at now. And yeah, so it's all online. You can read it. It's kind of the dumbed down version of this because I'm going back in and polishing things up and refining it. There's little typos in the online version, of course. And you know, now I've refined it and perfected it and it's ready for print now. So that's the long story.
Oh, before we went on the air, you actually had one of the books in your hand. It looked fantastic. Could you show that on camera? That would be great.
So this is the first 2 in the slipcase. And so like this is book 2. It's like 170 pages long. And it's just full color, really high quality printing and art and binding, cloth binding. It's just I don't know. The whole series is just, it all feels the same. It has a really nice high quality. Yeah. And yeah, 1,000 pages total. I didn't even plan it to be 1,000 pages, but it ended up being 1,000 pages long.
Man.
So I'm really happy with the end result. And I can't wait for people to see the ending of the book. You know, you can read it online, but I'd say if you plan on buying the book, just get the book because that's the intended form. That's the way I designed it in book, you know. And then I converted it to web
and put it on Webtoons.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of like sloppiness to the Webtoons version because I was just trying to get it out there, you know, trying to hit those deadlines.
But let me ask you this. Okay, so you worked on Remind, and then you came. What sparked this specific idea for Sithrah?
You know, before I even started working on Remind as a graphic novel, I had the story idea, and it was based on I read I'm a Christian, so I read in the Bible the faith of little children is like we need to have faith of little children, right? And that just kind of struck me as odd. Like, what is the faith of a little kid? And it's kind of this it's kind of like this very easy to forgive and like not blindly because that's the wrong word, but just being able to push forward even though things might seem impossible. And I came up with this story with Sithrah because it was partially inspired by my love for Miyazaki movies as well.
Yes,
but I just wanted to have kind of more of a Western worldview because, you know, Miyazaki stuff is very much rooted in like Chinese, like the way they look at spirits and stuff, you know? And so I really wanted to have kind of more of a Western, almost with Christian roots type storytelling, but in that same kind of storytelling way, you know? And so Sithrah is this, it's basically kind of like an angel, but I have him this like little furry creature instead to kind of, so it's like Miyazaki type stuff, like not Naruto, Totoro, you know? It's just like, there's just something cool about that. If you have this furry creature that's unlike anything you've ever seen, suddenly you don't have any presuppositions about what it means. And so you can kind of like go into these worlds and explore it and not be like, oh, he's talking about the Catholic Church or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? And so I really love storytelling like that. That's just, it takes you away from familiar things and just lets you experience the story instead of trying to decode it. You're just able to experience the story. So anyway, it's really this journey of faith for this little girl. She lost her father. She doesn't know where he is. Their plane crashes. She starts seeing this invisible spirit thing that's following her. She meets up with this teenager who's very troubled, has this dark, like demonic type past. And he starts leading her in these different directions. And she doesn't know if it's good or bad, if it's a trap for her or if Sithrah is good or bad. it just goes into this really crazy world, and it leads her in and out of the spirit world basically to try to find her dad. And it's all based on her faith, which is the faith of a little child. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of it. And that's where the story evolved from.
Okay. So I want to ask you, okay, because I thought you had like really beautiful colors and everything. So you're obviously the writer and the artist. Did you do the coloring as well, or no?
Yeah, I did everything on it pretty much. Yeah. The coloring, I really started perfecting my coloring with Remind, I think. And then I got the job at DreamWorks about halfway through my Remind 1. And I really learned about color theory at DreamWorks, and just how these guys at DreamWorks just put colors together, which just blew my mind, and it just completely changed what I focused on. And so you can really see in Remind 2, the color theory just really developed. And then Sithrah just was a continuation of that. And so yeah, the colors were really important to me on Sithrah, and I think that's one of the most beautiful aspects of the book is the coloring. And I don't know if I'm going to keep going like my next series. I'm planning on it being black and white, because I feel like, okay, I did the coloring thing, accomplished that, check. But I still love lighting. I think even with black and white work, if you do really neat lighting, it can just really grab your attention.
Well, I was checking out the art, and it just really appealed to me, man. I was like, wow, this looks, and not to mention, you have what I think is a sweetheart deal where you can get all 6 books for only $99. So you get over 1,000 pages for only $99. And I was like,
yeah, and you won't be able to find that online anywhere else, because the reason for that price is I'm selling the first 4 for half price. So they're $25 books, and the first 4 are cut the price in half, because I have them sitting here in my storage unit, and if I don't sell them, they're going to just sit here. And so I want to really, like, with this final release of the last 2, I really want to sell the old ones, and I have enough for about 800 full sets still before the campaign launched. Now it's obviously a lot less, but and the box sets are very limited as well. There's only going to be 500 that are signed of the last 2 books. So yeah, there's a lot of really good deals in this campaign that, if you win it for a good deal, that $99 one is the best, because, especially after the books sell out, when they go on Amazon, my old stuff, it sells for like $50 for a Remind hardcover now that's sold out. Like, if you try to find the second hardcover, it's just gone. And it's like, people are like emailing me, hey, can you sell it? I'm like, I don't have any. You'll have to get it used for $50. I'm sorry. So anyway, not to put any unnecessary pressure on anyone, but now's a good deal. It's a really good deal.
Don't twiddle your thumbs. Go ahead and act on it now.
And the shipping is really cheap in America. I mean, you'll be surprised at how cheap the shipping is for America. International, it's expensive. You'll be surprised at how expensive, but I'm not ripping anyone off. It's actually what it costs. In fact, it's a little cheaper than I'm charging, a little less than what I'm being charged. So,
they're big, beautiful books, though. I mean, those are fantastic volumes that you showed there.
Yeah.
I was really impressed when I was like, oh man, I was like, you and Doug to Naple are my spirit animals. One day I have a brand collected volume. And
I just love the big, thick hardcover books. There's just something about it that, like, I want to make the thing that I want to collect, like I make these little, I've been making these little short books. They're little like issues, and they're about 100 pages each. And these are just for my patrons. This is for my next series. But I don't really want to release these to the public. I want these to be like exclusive perks for people, and for people who support me on Patreon. But whenever I put something out, I want it to be the collector's edition. And I've tried even publishing Remind as a soft cover, like a real cheap edition, like for $10. You can get the what is it, 150 page first book for $10, full color. And I was like, this is perfect for stores. The problem is I'm not a big publisher. I'm an artist, self-publisher. And so stores still don't care about me. I'm selling still directly to my fans and directly to my friends and audience. And so I don't really need to do the cheap edition to get through the store's doors. I just need to give my audience the collector's edition that they want, you know? So that's what these books are. These are the collector's editions. And then after that, you know, like I'll move on to the next collector edition of the next series. So that's kind of my business model anyway. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, I've been doing it about 9 years now, almost about 10 years.
We're gonna go back in time on you, but before I do that, okay, so you've got over 1,000 pages in this. How long from the time that you first had this idea and loaded up the first one on Webtoons to the last cartoon that you loaded up on? How long did it take you to complete all these?
Well, I think I wrote it, and it was about 2002 or 3 is when I wrote the story, and I was writing it to be a movie. So I was in animation. I was in that world. I did storyboards for a living for a while. So I was just thinking, I want to direct this eventually. And Miyazaki, I wanted to do what he's doing. And then I started doing Remind as the comic. I switched gears from movies to comics, and it was really successful. And that was after I wrote Sithrah. And so Sithrah was just sitting there. I was like waiting for the right time. I didn't feel like I was a good enough storyteller to tell it yet, because it was so deep and difficult of subject matter for me to wrestle with, And so I took about a year off and just worked at DreamWorks, didn't work on any comics after Remind was done. And then I plunged into Sithrah in January of 2014. And that's when I just dove in. I said, okay, it's time to do Sithrah now. And I started putting it out on Sithrah.com. You can't see it there anymore. But I started just putting out one episode a month. And it was just like kind of a scrolling feature, very artistically put together. And there was even animations in it. I just wanted to kind of put all the bells and whistles into it for a really cool update every month. And I started my Patreon account at that time. And it was just like, whatever I get done every year is what I'll get done. And that's it. And then, after a year, everything changed. Like life turned upside down, and I quit Hollywood and moved out here and was hired by Webtoons. And it was just like full blast then. And so, 2014, I started it. The beginning of 2018 is when I wrapped up the final issue on Webtoons. So it's been sitting here on my computer waiting to go to print for about a year now. The last couple books.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's about a 5-year journey for Sithrah as far as like actually doing the production of it. But before that, it was another 10 years before that, or whatever it was, from just, having the story marinate. And I really like doing that. I like writing stories and then letting them sit, because they can mature.
Okay, so I always like to talk to different creators about how they go about putting their stories together. I've talked to Doug. When I've talked to Doug TeNapel, he'll have his little cards and he'll lay everything out, and then he'll start doing like a first draft and all this kind of thing. How do you, when you come up with your story, do you write it out first, or do you get the whole big thing together? What's your process?
It's tricky, and it's definitely evolving. As I'm doing it more and more, it's evolving. But I liked starting with scenes and like a mood and a scene and a setting that really gets me excited. And then I'll usually write that down or draw a sketch and just put it away. Sometimes I'll put it in a file where I'm like, I don't know where this is going to go to. But eventually I start getting multiple ideas for multiple scenes and realize they all kind of apply to the same stories, and start building a file on, or in my case, my flat file, I have little sections in there for different story ideas I'm working on. And so depending on how many of these like little pieces I've like discovered over time and filled this thing, a folder with, I start feeling like, okay, there's enough here that the story is starting to gel together, and it's getting me excited, and I feel like I could, work on this next. So then I usually start, when I get to that phase, I usually start thumbnailing. And maybe it's because I was a storyboard artist for a long time, but I'll just start filling up books with thumbnails. And that's a lot of the writing process for me, is visually figuring out if it's exciting to me. And so my scripts end up being like bullet point lists, like really simple bullet point lists of key scenes and key moments mixed with thumbnails. And then I might write a little bit of dialogue in there somewhere, but a lot of the times I do it like the Marvel way, like Stan Lee said, where he would give an artist like a bullet point list, and he would draw all these pages, and then he would write the dialogue last. And I tend to work that way because the art's really what leads the storytelling. And if I can't hit it with the art, then I'll mention it with the writing. You know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
so, because I really want them to play off each other nicely, and I want the colors and everything to just give you the right feeling. To me, it's all about the mood and the feeling and the setting, and getting people to feel the way the characters feel, and at least close, or in some way, like, everyone has these moments like where you're dumped by your girlfriend or something, and it was raining and it was dark. It's like, how do you convey that feeling into a comic book scene? You can use those same colors, you can use some of those same phrases, and if you built up the characters the right way, you can kind of get close, at least make it relatable to someone who's reading it, pull back those feelings for them. So if you can do that, and if I can do that, then man, I think I've succeeded. And then string that together with a long story arc with like moral dilemmas that I've faced in my own life, and questions I'm pondering. It turns into a really fun, powerful story, I think. So anyway,
I really like that you said that, specifically because I tried writing scripts in both style. I've tried to write the more detailed type script, and it felt kind of stiff and rigid to me. And then it was suggested by another artist that was working on Brand before Kanan came back to the project, Shelby Robertson. He was like, we should do Marvel method. He said, it sounds like this is very visual. We should do Marvel method. And I was like, I didn't want to do, I thought it had to be a straight up linear script and act one, page 3, all this. It's got to have all that stuff. But as I was going along, I didn't really like what was coming out of the keyboard as I was typing. It was, and I've shown my Marvel style script to a few of my friends, and someone was like, "Man, you got way too much information in there." But that's why I know I have the right artist with Kanan White, is because when I gave Kanan the script, he had said he normally gets a straight traditional comic book script. And then he looked at my script, and he said, man, I get so much more freedom with your script. Not to mention, when I'm going along, I watched him draw, and he actually had my script pulled up, and he was going over it like it was like, it was like the holy papers or something. He was going everything. He was getting everything. And I was like, man. And then he'd lay it out, and it would be like thumbnails and everything else. Like, I really did feel like we were making, because I kind of look at my book Brand as more of like a comic books type movie. Yeah. It's a movie in a comic book setting in a way.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the collaborations I've had with Kanan have been fantastic. But you mentioned being a storyboard artist and doing these Hollywood films and everything. So I actually want to, because man, you got quite a jacket on you on IMDb.
Yeah.
And what was the first movies that you started getting work for as a storyboard artist?
My very first interview was for this. Well, actually, my very first interview was for The Matrix.
Oh,
I got represented by this agency, Famous Frames in LA, and I was still living in Idaho. I had no idea how to even present myself to anyone. I was like 20, and they were like, "We got you an interview for The Matrix." It's these Wachowski brothers. No one knows who they are, but it's cool. Like, we're gonna fly you out, and you can go meet with these guys. So I met with them and just showed them like a huge amount of like comic work, and I was just like, and this is blah blah blah. I was just running my mouth like trying to explain it as I was flipping through pages, and the producer put his hand on my shoulder and he's like, "Calm down, son. We can't understand a word you're saying." And so I failed that interview, but it was just like, I remember staying up in my hotel room till 3 a.m. reading the script and thinking, this is great. Like, is this a normal movie script? Like, this is my first script I ever read, was The Matrix, right? So I had no idea. There was no frame of reference, for me. So anyway, a month or so later, I actually drove down there and stayed in some friends of friends' place, and told the agent, "Hey, I'm here." And they got me a Doritos job one day, and the same day I had an interview with another movie, and it was called
Doritos commercial.
A Doritos commercial.
Great. Okay. I was like,
And
they got
funny,
a factory. That's bad.
man. It's like, most storyboarding work I did was commercials, but it's funny that Doritos commercial, I'm still best friends with the director. His name is John Lindauer, and he taught me how to animate. We hung out. We went and had drinks afterwards. We're still great friends, and I call him up all the time for advice. He writes scripts now. Anyway, it's a long story. So after that, I went to an interview in, I think it was Studio City, for this movie called Boogie Boy. Low budget movie. They were trying to be like, they were trying to make a movie like Quentin Tarantino style, but it didn't quite work. But they hired me, and I did storyboards for like 2 weeks on that movie, and they loved it. I met Joan Jett, the singer of the rock star. So she was in Boogie Boy. So it was just kind of like, everything was like, whoa, this is great. So this is Hollywood. This is how it works, And I worked on Blade as well. Like, that was an interesting show. Yeah, Blade 1 and 2. On 2, I just worked on the credit sequence, but on Blade 1, I had a big part in it. I designed like all the visual effects with the wraiths and like a lot of the building, like the building. What was it? I forget. I haven't seen it in a long time. The building of the bad guy, whoever it was.
Went to the end. The visual effects the visual effects are obviously not as advanced as they are now, and they tried to
dated,
monster and the whole deal.
They're so dated. But what was neat about that is they filmed it, and then they would print it out on paper, and then I would paint over top of not each frame, but probably every 5 seconds, I would paint over top of it and draw over top of it what the visual effects should look like. So this is before I used computers. It was crazy. And I still have some stacks of these papers. Like, I would use tracing paper, sometimes draw the wraiths, and then cut them out and glue them onto top of the printout. It was really bizarre. And it's because they hired a visual effects company, and they just like did a horrible job, apparently. And so the director was like, I'm taking control of this. And so he had an in-house team of people. It was me and this other guy. I think his name was Art. I forget his last name. And we both just painted all the visual effects over top of the frames, and then they turned it into the visual effects companies to do it. And so and I have a credit for storyboarding, but I didn't do any storyboards on it. It was really odd. But worked on that for a long time, like for months and months, and that was really fun. I have pictures of me holding the blade guns, and Wesley Snipes came busting into the room once. Oh no, his assistant came busting in the room going, "Hey, does anyone have a lighter?" Because Wesley Snipes pulled a joint out of his sock and wanted to smoke it, but he didn't have a lighter.
I'm
sorry, I don't have a lighter.
You can work on Blade 3 though, right?
I never worked on Blade 3, no.
So Blade 2, I love Blade 2. Blade 1 and Blade 2 were great. Blade 3, it's part of the trilogy, but
Yeah, Blade 2 is interesting.
Okay, so when Blade comes out and you know that you spent all that time working on it and it's a hit, what's that feel like?
Oh, it's really neat. I mean, it's so cool to work on movies that are big because everybody knows them. You don't have to explain what you worked on anymore. Like when you're working on commercials, it's like there's a Doritos commercial. You know the one? No, not that one. Oh, I guess you've never seen it. Whereas you can say I worked on Blade, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, I've seen it, or at least I've seen the poster. Same with like the Kung Fu Panda movies. Like I worked on that trilogy. It's like everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
Everybody has basically seen my artwork, which is surreal.
No, but yeah, I love Kung Fu Panda. I love I'm a big anime guy. I'm a big fan of animation. I like more of the hand-drawn animation, but movies like Shrek and everything, they've been so commercially successful that they've taken over, and a lot of people aren't doing that hand-drawn animation anymore. But
well, the thing about Kung Fu Panda that you'll like then is for the first movie, I was brought in to work on that dream sequence, the opening sequence, which was hand drawn.
Yes.
And it was me and two other guys compositing it. I did a lot of the background animation and stuff. I didn't design anything on that one. I worked real closely with James Baxter, who was the head animator, and in his studio, and we did that opening sequence. And it's just like everyone wanted the movie to be So then I got hired to do visual development for the second movie. And then I started doing more of the like actual art and painting, and I did a little bit of animation too for the shadow puppet scene. I designed all the shadow puppet stuff though, pretty much.
Oh wow!
So almost like 80 to 90% of that, or no, 70 to 80% of that shadow puppet stuff, I designed it. And there's multiple scenes where I designed the characters, designed the scenes, and animated it. Like that's even more surreal to me. Like I had that much control over certain moments in that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like to design it, draw it, and animate it for $150 million movie. Like why was I doing, why did I have full control over like 5 seconds? I don't know. But I didn't
work on any of the video games, did you? Because I played like
I never worked. The only video game stuff I worked on was like when I did storyboards. I was hired to storyboard out like some of the the scenes in between gameplay. So there was a handful of video games I worked on back in the late 90s that I just storyboarded scenes for them, but it wasn't anything more than that. Yeah.
Man, no,
storyboarding was a good career it was like a real fast track into learn the ropes, buddy, or get out, because it was quick paced and you're working with a different director almost every day. And so you not only meet directors and producers, but you get thrown into jobs where the producer might hate your guts and he's just making it known, and you're like, get these done, get out of there. And then another one, you're best friends with the directors. And then you realize everybody works differently. And it's just so like across the board, like range of what you're experiencing, working with all these different people. And then you start realizing anyone can do this because there's a bunch of idiots doing it. Sorry. I mean, there's brilliant people doing it, but there's also idiots.
That's the nature of the beast, my friend. I would say that.
So that gave me confidence. Like, hey, I can do my own animation. I can direct animation. I can do a comic book. Like half the people out there do not know what they're doing. More than half the people. So, I think I know what I'm doing. So there's parts I don't know, but it doesn't matter because there's plenty of other people that don't know what they're doing too.
Okay. Now, of the 3 Kung Fu Pandas, my favorite was part 2. Part 2, I love the peacock. It was just, you could see obviously a progression in the animation. I just thought they hit everything in Kung Fu Panda 2, and it just I really loved it. Beautiful job on that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's the one I worked on from start to finish. Like a lot of stuff I designed in that, and worked on a lot of sets and locations. Some sets that just never made it into the movie, which is sad. But all right, that's the nature of the beast right there. Actually, let me show you something real quick.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm excited now. All right. How you guys?
It's not anything you probably haven't seen, but these are the posters that were for, I think, Kung Fu Panda 2, and they're You can't see them. They're designed to like fit together, right? Well, I designed these posters, so when I saw them like sitting there in DreamWorks and no one was doing anything with them, I took them because I'm really proud that, like, every now and then you'll get sequences and you'll get thrown different jobs, and this was just one of those situations where they're like, you got a week to design posters. Our marketing team is failing at it, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I do a bunch of designs, and everyone loved these, and they went straight into the pipeline, and then you see them on buses and around town. I'm like,
oh wow,
So, and another thing I just gotta say too, that the opening scene for Kung Fu Panda 3 was all me. They said, we love your comic style that you're doing on your own. Can you make the opening sequence really cool? And I was like, yeah. And so they let me work on it for a couple of weeks. I designed it and storyboarded the whole sequence from Po running down and the Furious Five following him and the credit scene, and they just used it shot by shot. It's like exactly the way I designed it. And so that's just really encouraging, like when you get to see what you've worked on and people get your vision. When they get your vision and they translate it exactly like you envisioned, it's just like nothing else. So the only thing better is releasing your own book and people like it and they buy it on Indiegogo.
Yeah. Now, yes, and speaking of which, I have dropped the link to Sithrah in the chat, and it is also in our description here today. I am very pleased that Jason Brubaker has taken his time out of his very busy schedule to sit with us and chat today. But I have to ask you a question, Jason, because there was one particular movie that I saw on your list of credits, and I gotta ask you about it.
I think I know which one it is.
Deuce Bigalow.
Yep. Yeah, Deuce Bigalow, male gigolo. I don't know how that happened. It was another job. I love Mike Mitchell, by the way. He's the director of it, and I just really got to admire him. He had some short films that he made prior to getting his contract to do film, to make movies for Disney or wherever he made them for. He was later signed on with DreamWorks. And his short films are just brilliant. They're just so cool. Anyway, if anyone's ever, I don't know if you can find him nowadays. One's about a puppet. Anyway, whatever. No one knows, so who cares? So Mike Mitchell's really cool. And I came into this job, I wasn't a big fan of Rob Schneider, and I'm still not, because he I met him a couple times and I'm just like, no, like, well, so what funny story, like, Rob Schneider comes in and out the same place because he's meeting with the director and stuff, and I'm the storyboard artist. So one time I went to the bathroom and I'm in a stall, and Rob Schneider comes in and is in the stall next to me, and he starts cracking off like foul jokes about like he has diseases and it hurts, just stupid jokes. And I'm just not laughing because I don't think any of it's funny. And it's only me and him in the bathroom. And then finally he's like, so you're the storyboard artist, huh? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, did you read the script? I was like, yeah. Do you think it's funny? I was like, not all humor is like the kind I would like, and I don't know exactly what I said, but I was kind of like, I was trying to tell the truth, like it's not really my thing. It's like more based on crudeness, And then he just got mad, and he's like, I'm sick of all you yes men, tell blah, blah, blah. And he just stormed out. But it was funny because he called me a yes man, even though I completely was not a yes man. A yes man would be like, yes, Rob, your stuff is so perfect. I love it. So anyway, that's my story with Rob. I don't care. I'm not impressed. But the movie itself, it was fun to work with Mike Mitchell. I really liked the guy. There was some scenes though where he gave me the script. He's like, "Can you do these?" And I was like, Rob, I mean, Mike, I don't know if I feel comfortable drawing that scene. He's like, okay, whatever, I'll draw that scene. So anyway, it was.
That really brings me back to Kanan, because we've had that discussion. Brand is, it's got hardcore themes in it. We deal with a little with religion and other things, but it's definitely mature readers. It's not a children's book. And we've got like a pimp with a magic cane and all this kind of thing. And I've tried to tell Kanan, I'm like, hey, Kanan, we're in an adult situation here when he's trying to put the page layouts together, and he's like, I don't feel comfortable drawing that.
Yeah.
But then, like, when he has to draw a Wolverine, a werewolf getting his head chopped off, all of a sudden you see all kind of blood and gore and everything. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The problem with gore, it's the nudity and all
yeah.
But man,
that's kind of where I was at, especially in Hollywood. It's like I realize that I have to like have the parameters of what I will and will not do, because it's just a slippery slope. It just goes endlessly, and so I just had to kind of set up like, my boundaries, and like, hey, if it means I lose this job, then I lose this job. But people would respect what I wanted and what I wouldn't draw and what I would, and I think it served me well. I'm glad I had my boundaries. Everyone has their own conviction on it and their own reasons for it. Some people might struggle with gore more than suggestive sexual stuff, and vice versa. So it's interesting with Deuce Bigalow, though. That's one of the only movies where you can actually see my storyboards if you buy the DVD with extra stuff. And you go to special features and it shows storyboards. Those are my storyboards. And it's just odd. No one's ever displayed my storyboards anywhere before. So that was kind of neat. So
that's the only place is the Deuce Bigalow DVD.
Yeah, but it doesn't give me credit, of course. But I mean, I'm credited as a storyboard artist in the list, but it doesn't say they're mine. It's all good.
But you didn't work on any of the How to Train Your Dragon films, did you?
No, I never did. And I probably would have failed at that because I'm not really a dragon type artist. I don't think I could do it. I mean, I'm sure if I was like, okay, I need to learn how to draw dragons, like I could do it, but it's never been something that I've been fascinated with. So,
but you did two movies that my ex-girlfriend really, really loved.
Yeah.
The first one, I guess, would be Captain Underpants. I had to sit through that one a couple times. Maybe that's why we're not together. But like, you like animation, and I was like, yeah, but it always seems like she doesn't pick the cool stuff that I like. But she really loved Captain Underpants. It was a movie that she watched with her nephew a couple times, and they just bonded over that movie. So she really loved that movie. And the other one was Trolls, and you did Trolls.
Well, I worked on a previous version of Trolls. So they bought the rights to these dolls, or they had some sort of option with the rights, and they were trying to make this version of it where they looked really close to the original dolls, and they were just hideous. It just looked creepy and scary and ugly, and it was dated. No one cared. And so I was on the early team, like doing viz dev for this movie that no one wanted to work on because it was so ugly. And
that's funny.
And then finally it got canned, and we were like, oh, praise God, and then it got relaunched again, but redesigned. And they basically, I found out later because I'm friends with one of the executives who negotiated this deal. And he basically was like, told Kassenberg, he's like, if you can give me so many $1 million, I don't know if he wants me to tell him, I can go and negotiate and buy the rights, and then we can make it the way we want to make it. But we need to have control over this. And so sure enough, he got on a plane, flew over there, bought the rights instead of just had an option to do it some way. I don't know the technicalities, and then they launched it in this other direction, and I had nothing to do with the new direction.
The 350.
Honestly, yes. I don't like those hyper spastic movies like Trolls and Penguins and Captain Underpants. They're just not my thing, but they work really well with kids.
Yeah,
but that's
no,
just
trust me.
so
That's what
like,
I'm saying. I'm looking. I was
I get a
looking.
headache. I just want to
Yeah.
leave the theater.
Yeah, when I was looking over all of your credits, I was like, "Yep, my ex-girlfriend. I had to watch that with her kids. I had to do this."
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was like, "Oh, penguins. Yeah, okay,
yeah,
yeah, the penguins of Madagascar. Okay, boom, saw that." And
yeah,
I was like, "Man, but you got some. Like I said, you got the Captain Underpants had its moments, but the
yeah.
Kung Fu Panda stuff
Exactly. Kung Fu
tip
Panda,
of
I'm
the
proud of.
hand.
I'm really proud of that one. That whole series. I'm like, yeah, that's one of those movies I'm glad I worked on. I'm glad I had, some say in the design of it, and just some good experiences, good memories from that. So that'll always be on the top of the list of jobs that I've had. That and Blade was really fun. Um, so yeah, there's some good experiences in there.
There was talk at one point that there was going to be a Kung Fu Panda 4. Have you heard anything about that? Or
I haven't asked anyone. I wouldn't be surprised. It's well, DreamWorks got sold, and so it's in different hands now. But the way it worked before is like as long as you hit that right number, which I don't know exactly where it was, and it was always kind of moving. But as long as you hit that right number, there's always going to be a next movie. You know, because it just means more money in the bank. And so,
keep making Ice Age movies, yeah.
yeah. So I don't know where it's at. I don't think they were ever planning on doing a 4 when I was there, but then they put out the TV series, and it depends how the new executives think it's going to work, and rebranding it and remarketing it, and we'll see.
All right. So if you got that phone call saying, "Hey, we got greenlit for Kung Fu Panda 4," are you there or no?
If they asked me to show up, I at this point I would have to say no, because I have.
Oh, wow.
Well, see, honestly, I was in my contract ended when I was in the middle of Kung Fu Panda 3, and it was a really crazy time at the studio. A lot of people were worried about losing their jobs, but for the last year, I was like thinking I need to quit LA and I need to move back to Idaho. It was just kind of like I just had this. It just was the thing I need to do. I really felt like God was telling me it's time to change some things now, and start pursuing this comic thing. The timing is right now. And so I was kind of like on my, trying to plan my way out. And then my contract ended, and I went into the meeting about it, and it was just like they were just all assuming I was going to stay and keep working on Kung Fu Panda 3 all the way through the end, which would have been another year and a half of work at least. And they were going to give me another like 3-year contract, which would have been great, and a little bit of pay increase and all that stuff. And I was making over 100,000, so I was doing fine. But
DreamWorks paid pretty well. He was always talking about that. So
yeah, and so I was like, you know what? I just can't. I've already made plans to, after this contract's done, to leave. And so, and everyone was kind of shocked, like that I wouldn't stay. Like, people are getting laid off, and you're one of the people that can stay, and you're working on one of the better series, And I was just like, well, I think it's the right time for me to go. I'm sorry, And so I left, and they've called a couple times for different things, for different positions, even from a distance. And I've turned them down just because I have too much work to do on my own stuff. Like when I was posting Sithrah on Webtoons, it was a weekly schedule. So there's no way I had time. I would have had to completely pause my own work to work on something for them. And I could have made a lot of money doing it. But the reason I left Hollywood is because I just felt like I don't want to beautify someone else's message anymore. People are hiring me because I obviously have some sort of skill that helps them sell their product and beautify their message. But now it's time for me to beautify my own message, or the message I feel like I should be saying. And so it was a real personal shift, away from just whatever people are paying me to do something with a purpose, and so I'm not in any way tied to DreamWorks or any of the movies. I don't think there's very little that could convince me to go and work on it, it would have to be like everything would have to check off perfectly, and I would have to be aligned with the message, and I would have to love all the people on the project. You know what I'm saying? It would have to be a really perfect stars aligned type situation where I felt like God is saying, go. And I'm like, yes, you know, but in this case, I feel like God's saying, stay here, do this, you know, I'll take care of you. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Final segment here. You're done with Sithrah. These books look fantastic. Your Indiegogo is doing very well. And you said you have some other projects in the works.
Yeah.
What do you got coming, if you can share?
Yeah. Well, actually, these little books here, this is Phobos. This is a book I started when I was in high school, and I've relaunched it since. It's a spoof on the classic horror characters. So you got the mad scientist and Frankenstein, and it's like the Munsters or Addams Family, but it's just a completely different take on it. This is about 200 pages right here. I'm giving these to my patrons exclusively, but next year I'm planning on doing an Indiegogo probably in March for a 500-page volume 1 of this.
Like hardbound and the whole deal?
Hardbound, whole deal. These are manga size right now, so they'll be the slightly larger manga size. And yeah, I have about 4 volumes kind of planned. So that would be about 2,000 pages if I follow through with it. But I'm going to test it with the first volume and just see if people like that first arc. And if it goes really well, then I'll keep going with it. If not, then there's a couple other stories that I want to develop, like keep developing and throw out there, you know, because it's really interesting now that I'm doing it full time. I can't quite be as hard-headed about like saying, I'm going to do this story even if no one cares, right? Because that's kind of how I would do it before. Like, I have a job at DreamWorks, so that pays the bills. I'm going to do this story now. If no one buys it, fine. At least I finished it, you know? And it's worked for me so far. But now it's like, I got to make sure that people care enough to actually buy it. Otherwise, I won't be able to afford to do it because that's where all my income comes from now, you know? So I'm approaching it going forward like, okay, I'll do a bunch of work. I'll give people a bunch of content, but if they don't come out of the woodwork to back it and support it, and if it doesn't pay me enough to keep going, then I can't justify it anymore, you know? So it's a different game now, but I'm still luckily I still have enough ideas that I have a bunch to choose from. And so they're all still my ideas, and they're all still messages that I'm in love with and I feel like need to be said. It's just, which one's the right one? I don't know. You know, I'll try this one. Let's see if it works. So that's kind of how I'm living right now.
Oh man, that's beautiful, man. I respect the work ethic, the hustle, man. It just seems like you got everything all planned out, and the books look great, man. That's the thing, man. I was just so impressed when I saw it, and I was just like, man, this is incredible. So I'm thrilled to talk to you today, man. This has been amazing conversation. Obviously, feel free to come back anytime. We can, but again, guys, the link to Sithrah is in the description here, and it's also in the chat room. Jason, please tell everyone if they would like to reach out and contact you. What do they need to do?
Well, you could go to my website, coffeetablecomics.com. You can find all my books there, links to all the webcomics versions there, and where to buy them on Amazon or whatever. If you join my mailing list there, that's the best thing, because that's how I really communicate with people when I have a new project coming out. Like, everything else is very, temporary, but that if you join the mailing list, it's like I keep in touch with those people. You can also join me on my Patreon account. And I give away, like I say, I give access to this Phobos comic, And every quarter, when I'm working on it, every quarter, I will actually print up and physically send everybody a copy when they're at the $5 tier and up. So it's just a freebie I give to my patrons. And I use all my money for that month, from that month on Patreon, to print it and ship it to people. So, and I just want it to be, it's like a little thank you to patrons for supporting me. And so just patreon.com/Jason Brubaker. And then I also have a YouTube channel. You can just look up Jason Brubaker on there.
All right. That is fantastic. And I'll add the coffee table comics into the description there as well. That sounds like something people would be interested in checking out. So again, Jason, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a thrill for me, man. It's a great conversation. I can just talk to you all day, man. This has been fantastic. Keep creating, brother. Keep doing what you do. And yes, but all right, guys. This chat is over. I'm gonna wrap this video up. And if you guys want to reach out to me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and right here on this YouTube channel. Everywhere is at Akari Press. And if you type in AkariPress.com, it will take you directly to my Indiegogo campaign for my comic book series brand with the phenomenal Kanan White. We're on Teespring. We're on Amazon.com. The links to those are in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out.